son asked me why I didn't wear green today for Update Sunday. I did. Wrong son. I'm a fan of football. I'm a big fan of football and of the Steelers because I was born and bred into it. It is in my DNA. Growing up in Western PA in the 70s, my extended family is from downtown Pittsburgh. My uncle actually knew a number of the players. They would actually pick him up to take him to the game. I watched it as they went through the 4 Super Bowls. Now, the first one, I was still kind of young, so I don't really remember that, but I definitely remember the last 2, maybe the third, the second one there. But I remember all of their plays. That was always on Sunday that we were watching the Steelers or watching them in the Super Bowl. This was the pinnacle of life. We had the Steelers even while this part of the country was in a downturn from the steel industry. Man, we had the Steelers to hang on to root for, and they put us on top when we were down and out because they were the best. 4 trophies in 6 years, not been approached yet. So, Steelers fan, the line is I'm not just a Steelers fan, I bleed black and gold. So, now, of course, the 70s gave way to the 80s, which were not so glorious. And that's summarized in one name, Cliff Stout, our new quarterback. You're going, who? Exactly. He had this big old afro going on. He was a white guy. He had this big old hairdo going on, and he couldn't throw the ball for whatever. And that gave way to Mark Malone. Oh, poor Mark Malone. I remember watching a game. It was in December. It was a home game. And you remember how fans would like make those big banners and, they would like make their favorite player or they'd have some kind of fun saying on it there, green's going to crush you or whatever. They rolled this gigantic banner out in December and it said, Santa, we need a new quarterback. Ours is broken. That's a home game. I'm like, man, that just warms your heart. Of course, the 80s gave way to the 90s and the resurgence of the steel defense and some great years in there. And if it weren't for, a $35 million payout on the Super Bowl in 1995, we would have had a 5th ring, a 7th ring by now. If you want to know the truth about that, you just come and talk to me. I have the footage and the data to show you as a $35 million payout. Remember Matt from California? He's a Dallas fan. He's like, oh, you're just squabbling. I sat down with him and laid it out, showed him the video, and he was like, oh, dude. Somebody sold out on that. Yeah, there you go. Thank you for the amen. And that gives way into the 2000s and into the current era. So I've been a fan, through the ups and the downs of it all. I have, gained things through the years. I have, I've got the classic T-shirt there. It's not T-shirt, the classic uniform here of green. I've got the little Snuggie cap with the ball on top. Those are authentic from the 70s. Those are great. And, all the different types of paraphernalia. And then when I was living back in Meadville, I had a friend at church that was a truck hauler, and he happened to be hauling truck when they demoed Three River Stadium. And so I have a piece. I have a piece of turf, not from the field, but from the sideline, from Three River Stadium. It's locked at home in the Holy of Holies. You have to take off your shoes to be able to go see it. I have all the stuff. I have all the gear. I watch them. I'm enthusiastic. I'm never down and out with them. I am a big fan of the Steelers. Lifetime fan. But we're starting a series today that is asking the question of going, is this what Jesus is looking for in the people that he's calling to himself? Is he looking for, like a Steeler fan, someone to kind of come along and say, yeah, we're on board with you, and boy, we'll buy the t-shirt, and we're going to root for you every Sunday, and it's going to be awesome, and it's good, and you know what, I'm going to kind of hang in there, I'm going to have all the paraphernalia, and I'm going to know the names and whatnot? Or is he looking for something different? Kyle Idleman has created this series called Not a Fan to set up a distinction between what we may want and what Jesus wants. And he invites us into this place called the DTR. You know what that is? Well, I didn't know at first, so I'm going to let Kyle explain it to you.
All right, if you're a young man and you're in a relationship with a young lady, then the initials DTR, they're probably enough to strike fear into your heart. Many young men dread what's known as the DTR talk. It makes them uncomfortable, so uncomfortable that they will only use the initials DTR. They won't actually say the words. Is this helping? Getting any closer? The objective for many young men is to postpone, to run away from, to put off the DTR talk for as long as possible. In fact, many of them are so afraid of the DTR, they will terminate a relationship when they sense the DTR talk is imminent. Now, do you know what DTR stands for? Here it is. Define the relationship. It is that official talk in a romantic relationship where you determine the level of commitment. You define where the relationship stands, and you decide, is this thing going anywhere? Is it casual or is it committed? I remember, true story, I remember going on a date with this girl in high school. First date, we sit down for this meal, and she tries to have the DTR talk with me. The DTR on the first date. I got out of there PDQ. That's all I remember. I just ran away. But I'll give you this. There does come a point in a relationship where it's important to define where things are, to see if they've moved past infatuation and admiration, and they're moving towards deeper devotion and commitment. Now here's the thing. How you feel about the DTR talk is determined by how committed you are to the relationship. If the relationship is one of convenience, and that's kind of the way you want to keep it, I mean, if it's just kind of this casual weekend thing, then you're going to feel pretty uncomfortable. You're going to feel pretty anxious going into the DTR talk. You don't want to define that relationship. You want things to stay the way they are. But listen, here's what I want to ask you to do. I want to ask you to define the relationship between you and Jesus. Specifically, if we could, let's frame up that conversation by answering this question. Are you a fan or a follower of Jesus? I think that question really helps define where things stand. A fan is defined as an enthusiastic admirer. And a fan of Jesus, they might know the Christian bands. A fan may come to church every week. A fan may open their Bible and take notes. A fan may say grace before the meal. A fan may have a Jesus fish on the back of their bumper. They may make their ringtone on their phone a worship song. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are a follower. And so here's what a fan will do. A fan will find a seat in the stands, and they will cheer for Jesus. They will come on the weekends, and they will sit in the bleachers, and they will cheer. And as long as the season is going well, they'll cheer for Jesus. But if things start to go bad, right, if there's a few losses along the way, then what you'll find is that the bleachers empty out, and many of the fans go home. See, fans want a relationship with Jesus. They just want it on their terms. And so they want to follow Jesus close enough to get all the benefits, but not so close that it requires any sacrifice or commitment. What they're looking for, I think you would call a no-strings-attached relationship. Where, yeah, you come on the weekends, you sit in the bleachers, you connect with him from time to time, but it doesn't really mess with your life. It doesn't really change anything. I saw this report a number of years ago on what they called the new vegetarians. Okay, so these new vegetarians were younger people who called themselves vegetarians, but they still ate meat a lot of the time. And they interviewed this girl
Her name was Christy, and she said, "I'm a vegetarian, but I eat bacon." That's what she said. I'm a vegetarian, but I still eat bacon. Well, isn't a vegetarian by definition someone who doesn't eat meat? And isn't bacon considered a meat? So how can she call herself a vegetarian? See the problem? And so the real vegetarians got upset with the new vegetarians. They said, look, you need to change your name. Call yourself something else, but don't call yourself vegetarians if you're going around and ordering bacon. And so the new vegetarians, get this, they came up with a new name for themselves, and here's what they call themselves now. Flexitarians. Flexitarians. They don't eat meat unless they really like it, unless they really want it. Kind of like that. I mean, by definition, I'm a flexitarian. I don't eat meat unless it's being served. Yeah, then I'll eat it. And the problem is they were calling themselves vegetarians, but it didn't reflect what they were committed to, and that's what has happened. For many people, they call themselves followers of Christ. They call themselves Christians, but it doesn't really reflect their commitment to Christ. They're not actually trying to follow Jesus. And so what we probably need is a new name. And so I think fan works. Fans of Jesus. Just enthusiastic admirers. The deal is, though, Jesus was never really interested in fans. He wanted followers. And in Luke 9:23, Jesus defines a follower. And here's what he says. If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. So followers deny themselves. They take up their cross and they follow him. That's how Jesus defines the relationship he wants with you. My concern is that all too easily, a church can become a stadium full of fans instead of a community of completely committed followers. All too easily, it can become a place where people gather together and cheer for Jesus on the weekends, but at work, at school, in their homes, in their neighborhoods, doesn't really have much impact. And so many of us approach our relationship with Jesus that way. We don't mind making some minor changes in our lives, but the thing is, Jesus wants to turn our lives upside down. We might be fine with him doing a little touch-up work. Jesus wants complete renovation. We come thinking tune-up. Tune-up's fine. Jesus is thinking overhaul. We think what we need is just a little bit of a makeup job, but Jesus is thinking makeover. We think a little bit of decorating is required. He wants a complete remodel. You see the difference between a fan and a follower? So I got this email a number of months ago. It was sent to me from a person on our church staff who takes care of church membership records. Her job is to just keep track of who are members and who are no longer members. Anyway, she gets this email from someone who was a member, and they said, I don't want to be a member of your church anymore. And the only reason they gave, the only thing they said is, I don't like Kyle's sermons. Well, that begs for some explanation, right? I wanted to know about this person. I checked the name and address to make sure, it wasn't my wife. That would have been a problem. That was clear there. And so I just picked up the phone and I called the person, didn't know him. And when he picked up the phone, I said, hey, this is Kyle Idleman. I understand you're leaving the church because you don't like my sermons. And it's caught him off guard. I mean, there was some awkward silence, and then he kind of started rambling, trying to explain what he meant. But somewhere in his lengthy explanation, he said something. And I wrote it down because what he said, I think in some ways just defines the relationship for him and for many others. And here's what he said. He said, whenever I listen to one of the sermons, I feel like you're trying to interfere with my life. You hear what he's saying? I'm fine coming to church. I'm fine sitting in the bleachers and being in the cheering section for Jesus. That's all well and good. But I don't want Jesus to interfere with my life. But when Jesus defines the relationship he wants with you, he invites you to get up out of your seat, to pick up a cross, and to follow him. It's not enough to just say, yeah, I'm all for Jesus. The idea is not just to repeat a prayer after a pastor, or raise your hand and say, well, that's good, I'm in. I got my ticket. I'll take my seat in the stands. He's called us to something much deeper than that. The invitation is not to become a fan. The invitation is to take up a cross and to follow Jesus.
I wanted to show you that because I wanted to admit that I'm a flexitarian. I eat meat, and every once in a while, if a vegetable's good enough, I'll eat it. DTR, it doesn't sound very biblical. That sounds really kind of 21st century-ish, right? You know, we got the little cute saying there for that. But don't be fooled. Jesus was very interested in the DTR. In fact, he did it a number of times throughout his ministry, but there was one particular time a couple times that we're going to take a look at here real quick, that he did this. And he does it kind of through three types of questions. Three questions that he goes, you know what, we're going to start to define this. What is this? What's involved in here? And so he's in his ministry, he starts it out, and, you know, it's just kind of him. Then he gets a couple followers, then he gets a couple more, he's preaching, he, you know, uses PowerPoint and some video clips, and, you know, people are like, hey, this guy's really onto something. He starts to heal some folks. And suddenly he's kind of got a nice crowd around him. He's like, boy, we got to expand the staff. So he hires he gathers up 12 guys around him, and things are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, he was getting huge crowds. This is what was ticking off the other religious leaders. They're like, oh, you're taking everybody from my church, and you got the thing going. Jesus was the hot stuff. And the disciples are going, man, did we get into the right gig? We got hired by the right church. This thing is going to go somewhere. This is awesome. This is amazing. I'm not talking a couple hundred people. I'm talking thousands of people were following Jesus around wherever he went to. He had a really successful ministry. And then John 6 happened. You know, all he had to do was just kind of keep going, and this would have been gravy. This would have been easy street. But in John 6, we have a situation arise where Jesus begins to ask some questions here. And the first question he's going to ask of them is, why are you here? I asked you this question last week. I didn't mean it quite in the same way Jesus did. We were just being reflective. But here for Jesus, he's kind of got a little bit of an edge to it. He doesn't literally ask this question, but it basically is what his point is. So John 6 starts out really wonderful. You know, he's got the thousands of people around him, and, you know, it's time for church to be over, and the disciples said, hey, we'd like to go home. The game's going to be coming on. Can you send these people home? And he's going, no, I've got to invent the church potluck. You've got to, guys, got to learn this because this is going to be essential. You can't be a church without a church potluck. And he feeds the 5,000. Now, it's not 5,000 people. It's 5,000 men. They didn't count the women and children at the time. So you're talking about a very large crowd here. And he feeds them all. And everybody's like, wow, this is great. The buffalo dip, did you get some? You know, it's great. You know, they're like, wow, this guy is awesome. He's a great preacher. He heals people. And man, the buffalo dip. It's amazing, right? I mean, he's on easy street here. All he's got to do is keep this thing rolling. And so he leaves, and the crowds keep on following him and asking him for more and more. And he turns to them and says this, you've only come looking for me, not because you saw God in my actions, but because I fed you and filled your stomachs, and for free. Yee. What happened to a nice, comfortable Jesus that kind of like hugs everybody and, you know, hands out the food and makes everybody happy? This is not a good way to like retain membership, right? All the disciples are going, take the Twitter feed from them right now. Don't have them say stuff like this. That's not good. This is going to offend somebody. But this is exactly, Jesus starts to define the relationship. I know what's really in your heart. I know what your motivations are. You're just a fan. As long as it's good, as long as I'm providing you bread in your mouth, you're on board with this. And that's really all this. This is all the deeper this goes for you. Now, knowing it and saying it are two different things, right? He might have been aware of it, but he comes right out and does the DTR and declares it. Well, this starts to offend some people. He doesn't back off. He kind of lays it on even harder. He does some hard teaching that we're not even going to bother to look at because it's confusing, but it just kind of starts to rattle them to the core of going, look, if you think all I'm here to do is kind of doing this trick of feeding you, you totally misunderstand this relationship. It's got to go deeper than this. And we know exactly what Jesus is talking about. You know people, you might be in that situation. Pretty much any one of us has been there where, we kind of get onto this God thing and, all right, this is good, and kind of growing, and I'm trying to figure things out, and my life's kind of improving because that's what God's there to do. He's adding stuff to me. He's making things right for me. And then when it doesn't quite go right, well, I'm not so sure I'm so excited about this. I'm not so sure that this God thing really works, right? All it's meant to do is deliver me good stuff. And Jesus is going to go, if that's all this is, that's not enough. You've missed it. Why are you here? Why are you here? The second question that he asked to do this, not only does he kind of add on some hard teaching, but then he goes, where are you headed? Where are you headed? Because he keeps on piling on, making this harder and harder, and eventually here's what happens. It says, from this time on, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. How about that? Not a verse that we often read. Jesus drops the church. Like, we're not talking about, he ticked off a few people because they didn't like the color of the carpet. It says many. A lot of folks just went, this is too much. I'm done with this guy, and I'm going to go back to the way it was. I'm going to go back to my life. I'm not going to follow this guy around anymore. He's not delivering on the goods, and so they leave. It's such a massive exit that Jesus then turns to the 12, his staff, and he goes, are you going to leave me too? Now, all we get is kind of the words of the scripture. You kind of have to read into them. But man, this one doesn't take much reading, does it? I mean, this isn't Jesus kind of like nail biting him going, you're not going to leave me too. And he's all fearful. He's like dropping the line on the sand, drawing the line in the sand of going, are you going to leave? Hey, this is a great time to jump ship right now. Everybody else is leaving. You can go too if you don't really get what this is. Jesus wasn't always just going, oh, yeah, we got room. Yep, don't worry. Yep, flexitarians, all right, come on. He takes this critical moment in his ministry when he's got the crowds, when he's got a stadium of fans, and he draws the line in the stand, and he lets them walk away. He challenges even his closest followers. Of course, their answer is, no, we're not going anywhere. They stick with Jesus. They stay with him because they've seen enough to go, there's something here. But there comes another point in Jesus' ministry, a little past halfway, a critical turning point that's recorded at the same place in the same way by all three gospel accounts. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all have it in the exact same kind of order. And he asked them the question, what does Jesus want? What do I want? What is this about? So what he's done is he's healed, he's taught, he still kind of has some crowds kind of in his favor, but then he pulls the 12 away, and he's sitting around a campfire one night, and he just kind of strikes up a conversation. He goes, what do the crowds say about me? What do the fans say? The greatest ever. No. they start kind of spouting off some of the answers. Well, some people think you're just a really great prophet. Some people think you're like Elijah, come back. Some people think you might be Moses. You might be this, you might be that, whatever. And then he turns the conversation and he directs it right at them and he says, but what about you? Who do you say that I am? This is a DTR moment, folks. If there ever was one. He is kind of going, what is this between? I don't care what other people think. I want to know what you think about this. Because the journey that we're going on really centers on this question. Because if you can't answer this one, there really isn't any point to the rest of the conversation. If you don't get who he is, there is no conversation to be had. It's not just what do I do for you, but who am I? Peter stands up and has his bold moment and he goes, hey, you're Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah, you're our rescuer, you're going to be the one that comes and makes this thing right. And Jesus says, yes, you're right, you've got this, we're on track. And that's exactly the moment that Jesus drops the second part of this DTR. The verse that we're going to be looking at for the next 5-6 weeks here. In Luke 9:23, it says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. There's no hedging around this. There's no hum-hoing about it. He just drops this of going, this is what it is, folks. This is what this relationship is all about. If you don't know who I am, you're not going to check in with this. So that's the first question. But then the second question becomes this. If anyone wants to. We're going to be spending the next 5 weeks drilling down into this. This is the ultimate call of Jesus. This is the DTR for your spiritual life. So you may be at a place where you're going, oh, I was here 7 years ago. I went through this. I'm good. I'm fine. We need that garbage bag back because we're not taking that stuff with us. Because if you're going, I'm good and I'm fine from 7 years ago, you need it more than anybody else. This is a place that we continually return to. There is no deeper call by Jesus. So you're at a different place. And if you're not at a different place, you need to be at a different place. This is us getting ready for what God has for us. We've been doing the building preparations. We've been doing the financial preparations. We are working on the spiritual preparations because if we are not in step with the one that we follow, if we don't have this relationship defined, if we think that being a fan is good enough, Jesus didn't think it was good enough then, he doesn't think it's going to be good enough now. And so my challenge to you is not to make a decision today, but a choice to say, you know what? We are going to dedicate this time as a church, the next 5-6 weeks, to go, God, I want to open myself up to you to speak directly into my heart and my soul and to understand where I'm at with you. Where is our relationship? What does that look like? Where are you calling me to? That's the challenge for today and the only challenge. Because if you're not willing to do that, we already know the answer. You're just a fan. You got the jersey. You might even have a piece of the turf. You got the hat. You watch all the games. But you're just a fan. And that's not what Jesus is interested in. So come, let's do this together. Next 5-6 weeks. We've got the sermon series. We have the small groups. They're great small groups. You're going to be watching. It's a narrative format. So you're watching kind of part of a story together, and then you're interacting about that story. No one's coming in as an expert. It is powerful stuff, and will cause you to be reflective about your life and about where you are at with God. So if you're not part of a small group yet, you can still sign up this week, and we're going to get them started. Tonight is the first one. So Let's pray together. Father, what more needs to be said here? We offer ourselves to you. We lay ourselves at your feet for you to do your work over the next 5-6 weeks. We are not going to presume where we are at, or that we're good, or that we're fine. We are going to let you look deep into our life, into our heart and our soul, to bring us in step with you. And so we lay ourselves at your feet for you to do your work. Amen.